So I've had a marketing career across many different industries, that being fashion, hospitality and technology. But I've also had a side hustle for the good old, I'd say 15 years now. 4 years ago, there was only platforms talking about how to get abs in 6 days, diet pills, and a lot of celebrity trash endorsements. So that is how the inspiration for Dose started. So one of the first steps we did, when I say we, I mean myself and my business partner. I work with a wonderful girl called Hetty Holmes, is really just look at the market, research exactly what was out there in terms of wellness content.
But was it simple to quit?
I had a failed company, and that was a very stressful but wonderful 2 years of my life. And I kind of always loved working for myself, so then became a freelancer, but deep down knew that I wanted to build a brand again. So I was always saving, thinking I'm not ready for it. I don't know what I want to do. I haven't met the right person to start this company with. Save.
Welcome, Shara, to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to meet you, Simon.
Well, I've heard so much about you and I just love what you're doing. Would you mind just kicking off things by telling my audience a little bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So as you know, my name's Shara. I'll say my last name just so everyone knows how to pronounce it, because it's always fun. My last name's Tochia. So I am a female that lives in North London, and I run a lovely wellness brand called Dose, and we are dedicated to transforming your mood. So Dose is actually an acronym for your feel-good hormones, which are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins.
So let's get straight into it. How did you start this business? For my listeners that love to start a business, how did you go about making this a reality?
It's a great question, and I'm going to keep this as summarized as possible. So I've had a marketing career across many different industries, that being fashion, hospitality and technology. But I've also had a side hustle for the good old, I'd say 15 years now. I've also taught spin classes before and after work. It's something I've always done as a passion. And I had no idea when I started doing that when I was at university that wellness or anything to do with exercise and health would become my full-time job. So after many, many different roles, I was kind of frustrated, let's say 4 years ago now, that there wasn't a platform dedicated to talking to someone like me who loves to exercise, but loves to reward themselves at the same time, i.e. have the pizza, have the glass of red wine because you've done the spin class at 6 a.m. 4 years ago, there was only platforms talking about how to get abs in 6 days, diet pills, and a lot of celebrity trash endorsements. So that is how the inspiration for Dose started.
And what were the first few steps that you took to make it happen? I mean, a lot of people have an idea, right? There's loads of my audience listening now that have an idea. But what were the first few things you did to kind of turn it into reality?
So there's a little bit of a backstory, which is I've actually had a failed company prior to starting Dose. So I had learned a lot in that situation. And after that, I had some time going back into employment and freelance work. But I knew and had learned a few tricks along the way. So one of the first steps we did, when I say we, I mean myself and my business partner. I work with a wonderful girl called Hetty Holmes, is really just look at the market, research exactly what was out there in terms of wellness content. And if anyone listening understands the wellness industry, they'll see that it's become a very popular category in the last 4 to 5 years. So we did a lot of research. And at the time of starting the business, I was in full-time employment working for Facebook and Instagram. And we started a newsletter. We wondered, do people actually want to hear about what's going on in London, like the latest vegan restaurant, the latest fitness studio, and the latest 0% alcohol brand. And we just created content every week and emailed a database at the same time that grew and grew and grew. So they were the first few steps.
And so it's that simple sometimes, isn't it? I think I love this idea that, it starts with a newsletter. I think sometimes people can overthink creating a business, and once you see that people are interested in that content, I'm sure people shared it, right? And that led to a growth in the database, and sometimes marketing is way too overcomplicated, and it can just be that simple. So after the newsletter kind of took off, which it clearly did, what happened next? What was the kind of next few steps that you took?
Well, at the time we were writing the newsletter, and we went out every Monday morning. Like I said, was working full time, and my business partner was also working full time. We had one of those, ironic situations now where those jobs came to an ultimatum. Facebook was offering me a full-time job, and my business partner's business was also offering her a full-time job. We were both consultants, and we basically sort of said, this business, Dose, has got legs. Is it time to jump ship? And in one of those very fortunate scenarios, we actually had our first client come to us around that same time. And we didn't honestly know what the business was. We were like, we've got this amazing community. What do we do with it? What does it grow to? Is it an app? Is it an aggregation marketplace business? And basically the ultimatum resulted in us leaving our jobs and our first paid client.
And so was it simple to quit? Again, thinking of my listeners that maybe are in a job they don't love, but it's security, right? It's that guaranteed income, pays the mortgage and so on.
Yeah.
How did you mitigate that risk? What was your mindset?
So again, a great question. And this comes back to my backstory. I had a failed company, and that was a very stressful but wonderful 2 years of my life. And I kind of always loved working for myself. So then became a freelancer, but deep down knew that I wanted to build a brand again. So I was always saving, thinking I'm not ready for it. I don't know what I want to do. I haven't met the right person to start this company with. Save. So yes, I quit Facebook quite quickly. But it was a question of living like a pauper, like you just do when you start a company, and all your disposable income goes into the business, or as you say, paying your bills.
I really like this insight, and I want the audience to really pick up on it. This is really interesting. You didn't know what you wanted to do, but you did know that you wanted to build a brand of your own and be your own boss. So you saved and kept your head down. That's really interesting to me, because I think for a lot of people that are listening, they don't have an idea. And they wonder, well, I'll wait until I've got an idea, then I'll put all my energy into it. But you did the prep work. Yeah, I think you set yourself up to have that ability to, I'm going to guess you didn't get yourself into a lot of debt. You didn't buy things you didn't need. You didn't get a lot of, monthly costs that would stop you from following up on your dream when it came to you. And that is very important. I think that's really quite special. And so how did you find your co-founder? This is another thing I know a lot of people struggle with, finding a co-founder or making the co-founder relationship work. So what do you think your secret sauce is on that?
So I had what's the right words to say this? I was very, very scared of working with someone after my first experience. So in the failure of my first business, to give a quick summary, it was a fitness aggregation business where you could find and book a fitness class anywhere, which is now known as ClassPass, because someone came in and did it and took over. And I did that alone. I did that with the most naivety you could possibly have as a founder. I did not know what the word startup meant when I started a business, but I did find someone to work with about a year down the line, and that person was not right for me. And it ended very sadly and very badly. So I was scared. I didn't want to work with anyone again. And as I said, I needed the break. I needed the income. I just needed time out. So when Hetty, my now business partner, approached me, she had been someone I'd worked with in these freelance contracts, and I really respected her background. She had also built a company, but with someone else, and been a little bit scarred. And someone really amazing in my life who is very successful and founded and a few businesses said to me, don't ever go into business with someone who hasn't been scarred. And it never left my brain. And being someone who had been scarred, meeting someone else who I respected who'd been scarred, I thought, there's something in this. Let me just see what this girl's like. So we became friends. We drank a lot of red wine. We did a lot of fitness classes. We did a lot of brainstorming. And that's essentially how Dose became Dose. What we did do prior to actually incorporating the company was work together on contracts. It's more of a trust relationship tester. I mean, we joke and say that we dated for a while, because that's literally what we did for about a year. And then we realized we liked each other. We respected each other. We had very similar long-term goals. We understood the hard work that a startup would be, and we wanted to do it.
Such a great insight as well, that only experience can really fully understand. But one of the reasons we do this podcast is to try and give people this knowledge before they go through the pain of what you're talking about here. And I love this point. You work with people that have been scarred, which sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But then there's so many learnings in that experience. And can I make an assumption, just on my own experience, but feel free to correct me, that one of the things was making sure you had very different job roles, making sure you didn't overlap 100%. Each other.
I should have said that. You're absolutely right. We are chalk and cheese. I mean, we have the same work ethic. We're absolute grafters, but she is a creative editorial genius. I am someone who loves people and commercial sales, and I cannot do her job. She cannot do mine. I mean, I think she could probably do mine if she tried, but she doesn't want to.
Yeah, I think that's crucial to the dynamic, and I think the work ethic alignment alongside having very different roles is when the magic happens. And so your story is just so important for my listeners to pick up on. So you meet your, you work. The other thing I thought was really good, by the way, the dating point. I mean, there's sometimes people jump straight into a partnership with someone. Why not date? I personally had great experience. My last company, I sold it to PwC in part because we dated that company before we sold it. And I think that's actually what made them want to work with my team and vice versa. And so I think it's really an underrated piece of knowledge there. People want to jump straight into a co-founder structure, and why not just work together for a while? I think it's such a good, be patient, right? Like you say, date. You wouldn't just marry someone, but people do, unfortunately. And then sometimes it works, let's call it luck, and sometimes it doesn't, right? So it's really important what you're talking about there.
I think you see or speak to sometimes at some points of the relationship and the business, your business partner more than you do your boyfriend, husband, girlfriend, wife. And that is testament to why we say we dated. You literally spend your life married to this person, so you may as well get on with them.
You said something else I think is also vital, is you respected them and their craft and what they could do. And I think that's also important. You've got to give them the space to make their own mistakes, but also, acknowledge that that they know more than you in that area, and give up the power of being the boss. Which I think is really, really interesting. So explain to us, what happened next? So the business, you've got the partnership, you're doing these commercial deals. So how did you build it out? Because again, a lot of people dream of building a business like yours. What do you think? Looking back, were the next few steps that were vital?
So at the beginning of Dose, we didn't know what it was. As I said, I came from trying to build a marketplace aggregation tech business, which I didn't know was until the end, and a business that never really made money. So I spent a long time of that business raising money, and I hated it, and I'm not brilliant at it. So I kind of sat there, and unfortunately, at the beginning of Dose, I was like, this is what we have to do. We have to raise money. But when we were at that kind of crux of our full-time jobs, and our first paid client was Nike, that came to us and went, we really like what you're doing. Your brand is really cool, and we think you're really ahead of the game. We were like, oh my God, someone's going to pay us. We called the first person we knew that ran an online magazine and went, how on earth does this work? Like, how do you monetize it? What's the process? Talk to me about your operation, and learn as much as we could from as many resources we could pull in our network.
And wow, what a first client!
It sounds super glamorous.
No, I know.
I mean, I've lots of money.
I've also worked with these brands, and it's hard work as well. But still, that's a big validation. I often thought that Nike could do a brilliant program to support entrepreneurs. Just do it. Just start your own business. Just do it. That tagline's so good, isn't it?
I love that. I love that.
Well, they've kind of accidentally done it by backing you as a client relationship. So that they've kind of done it without realizing it. So, but yeah. So just backtracking a little bit, I'm always fascinated to share with my audience the entrepreneurs' kind of history, how they've got this kind of, let's call it the entrepreneurial drive, which I think no one's born with. I think everyone develops it. But do you think entrepreneurs are born and bred? And were your parents entrepreneurs? How did this kind of entrepreneurial spirit in you manifest itself? How did it happen?
So again, amazing question, but I think the answer to that is both. So my dad was an entrepreneur, but he was a TV and video repairman with a shop in Forest Gate. So I should say I'm first generation, half Irish, half Indian, and I grew up in Essex in East London. Well, North East London, depending on where you are. So my dad did run a business, but he wasn't particularly driven by money. He was just a really, really chilled guy that wanted to earn a living for his family. My mother is an NHS nurse and has been since she was 19. She's 65. So completely unentrepreneurial and institutionalized by her job. But I do think the only reason, maybe subconsciously, of course, I saw my dad work for himself. But I think for me personally, I just found a problem I couldn't solve in the first instant. So my first business, I was a freelance fitness instructor. So I knew the fitness market. I'd worked for every gym in London, and I was a marketeer. So I saw the model in Open Table, which for anyone listening that doesn't know, Open Table, it's find and book a restaurant. And I thought, why on earth hasn't someone built that for fitness? And this was 10 years ago, before ClassPass existed, at the peak of the health and fitness boom in London specifically. So I think that was my drive initially. And then the subconscious was, yes, I'd known a few people in my career that had built companies that were good friends and probably always admired them. So a bit of both.
Just looking back at your history, I mean, you've worked for pretty much all, I think, some of the top brands out there, DKNY, Ralph Lauren, of course, Facebook. So, and Instagram, I mean, these are kind of dream companies to work for a lot of people. But so none of them tempted you to stay. It wasn't like, oh, actually, this employment life, it's a lot easier.
So I did a lot of those brands before I started working for myself. And when my first business died, I was freelance. And to the point when I was freelance at Facebook as well. I think once you've worked for yourself and you love the hustle and you love the drive and you love the risk, there's no going back. So even though I'd gone to Facebook, I was still freelance. And I told you deep down, like I knew I wanted to do it again. I just wasn't sure what during that time.
Mm-hmm. Did your parents, did they say, oh, you're crazy doing it again? Or were they like, did the first time, how did they respond when you said you're going to do a new company?
Well, it wasn't so much doing the new company. It was like, are you sure you want to leave Facebook? Facebook. And it was a very good year for me. I mean, I was a freelancer in a tech company. It was a financially stable year, let's call it, compared to the rest of the things I'd done. But I mean, my mum still has conversations at work, and obviously someone goes, oh, Facebook's a brilliant company to work for. And then she rings me 4.5 years into my now business going, are you sure you did the right thing?
Yeah, it's always Facebook. Yeah, it's. I know what you mean. That's a very interesting phenomenon, isn't it? I mean, parents love us. So ultimately, they're just doing it because they care about you so much. But I know a lot of my listeners. We get a lot of messages around this where there's almost parents worry about their children, and starting a business somehow seems risky. My view is that starting a business of your own is less risky than working for someone else, just because you're in control of it. You can decide whether or not you're going to get fired, and you can make your business survive by pushing some buttons, whereas you can't necessarily make sure Facebook survives. If Mark Zuckerberg goes and says something wrong in Congress, that could get shut down and you lose your job, right? So but it is an interesting phenomenon that people feel like starting your own business is risky.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really like your view on that. It's just a perception, isn't it? And I think, for me personally, there's nothing like the fear to drive you to earn money. When you have to pay your rent, you have to pay a mortgage or bills for your kids and feed people, there is nothing like the fear that drives you. And that's a personal thing. And something I should have added, talking about being freelance and starting Dose, is I have still, to this day, teach spin classes. So when I've had a bad month, I have ways of earning money. And it's not a lot of money because it's a freelance trainer, income, but it's still there if I need more.
That's really smart. And it's also good. It's almost like a hobby that pays you money, that keeps you sane and gives you that feeling. That I think that's really interesting as well. I don't do that. I might create a side hustle that is, just for fun, a bit of income in case the main job doesn't work out. The other thing you said earlier, which I think is really gold, is loving fear. That's the phrase you used when you spoke earlier. And I think that's really interesting too, because people in fear, most people see fear as something to avoid, right? Something they want to reduce the feeling of. I don't want to feel fearful. I don't want to be worried about cash flow, right? Who wants to be worried about cash flow? But, I think that, like you're saying, that fear actually is designed to help you. It drives you. It pushes you. It's a really, really interesting point you're making there. So how do you think you've learned to love fear? Because clearly, you've highlighted and been very open. You had failure. How do you think you've come to enjoy fear? How's that happened?
I think I've done every type of job that I can possibly be good at. And I know what makes me happy. And I believe in the statement, do something that scares you every day. Like, I really do believe in that. And I have been a freelancer. I've been a consultant. I've worked for a global tech company. I've worked in 4 different types of industry. And I've just weighed it up and gone, do you know what? Yeah, I earn a ton more money than I'm currently earning right now in my new business at Facebook. But I know what makes me happy.
Well, I think that's
experience.
Such a great statement. That should be on a T-shirt, like as people walk by. What makes you happy? Do you know? If you know what makes you happy and you go for it, that's pretty powerful. Do you think? I mean, just structurally for a second, I was wondering, your brand name's so cool. I love Dose. In fact, TikTok just sent me an e-newsletter this morning. It said, here's your daily dose. And I thought to myself, I believe in fate. Oh, no, I'm interviewing the founder of Dose today. I wonder if that's a trademark. But what about trademark? Did you manage to trademark the name? How did you manage to get that name protected?
Do you know what? Unfortunately, you can't. We've protected the logo and the brand name, but unfortunately, because it's a descriptive word in the UK, you can't trademark the name. So we're a little bit stuck with that one.
Yeah, that's just one of the things I've seen in business myself. I owned a business called Foodie, and it did really well. And then someone came out of the woodwork and said they owned the trademark to the word foodie. And naturally, they could have shut us down and take the last 3 years of income would have been theirs, because in theory, you're passing off, and got into quite a funny old legal situation. So I'm always warning people now, try to protect. But you've got the brand image protected. That's at least something.
Exactly.
No one can trademark the word, so you're okay, I think. But it is one of the things I like to bring up, especially with great names like yours. That's something people need to think about when they've come up with a good name. Can they protect themselves, and has someone else already got Foodie? So in my case, I wish I checked that beforehand. But yes, it's structurally quite important. So do you think when you're thinking about your business now, how do you define success for the business and for you personally? How do you decide what success is?
So we haven't funded the business to date. We very much have never put a penny into the business other than our own savings at the beginning, which was very, very small. And for us, success is consistent growth, especially in this last year during the pandemic, and being able to pay our team. At the moment, that is what success looks like for us. And don't get me wrong, we put I can change those metrics and those goals every month. But at the moment, that's what success looks like for us.
What do you think the critical factors were in your success? Do you think there's anything you can pinpoint in particular?
For the business now,
yes.
I think I had built an incredible network of people in my career and my previous business that was instrumental into getting the first paid income into this current business. So yes, it sounds amazing. Our first client was Nike. I'd known Nike for 10 years because I'd worked with them, and I had very much worked at keeping those relationships, even when they'd moved on to new companies. I think building a network is instrumental when you're starting out in the category you want to go into.
I know I've been on Clubhouse too much, because as soon as I hear that, I'm like, oh, your network is your net worth. I've heard it too much. People in millionaire rooms on Clubhouse shouting it out. Your network is your net worth. But it is very true. I think building, and that's why I would tell people, treat your suppliers with a lot of respect, because that later could be your partner in business and part of your network. And as you grow, so just treating people on both sides of the equation, suppliers or clients, of course, well, and building that network up will serve you forever. Actually, even after Dose, that will serve you, right? So it's a very good point.
100% agree.
And if you were to kind of do it again, start this business again, would you do anything differently?
Would I do? That's a brilliant question. Would I do anything differently? No, not at the beginning, maybe halfway through. I maybe wouldn't have spent a really long time trying to think about building an app, because we didn't do it, and that's a waste of my time. There's a million things I wouldn't have done in the last 4 years. But I think for me, again, talking about the failure of my first company, it taught me so much about what I wanted to do the second time.
Did you build a web platform first? Is that what you mean there? Did you build an app first?
No, so when we first started Dose, we thought we were going to create an app. I think our URL was actually doseapp.co.uk, and then we realised that we needed a ton of money. We both weren't technological people. Like I'm not a techie, neither is Hetty. We're like, what the hell are we doing? We're trying to build a brand with our strengths, at least in the initial stages. And again, for us to be a techie brand, we would have to try and find a CTO. We'd have to raise some cash, two things we're not particularly good at. We were like, great. Let's do what we know best.
That's another great nugget there. I think so many people sit there and say, right, okay, let's build a tech product, and the people involved aren't tech. And then they wonder, why they then have to raise money, which they're also perhaps not good at, and then they find that hard and spend all the time doing that, and then they try to hire people when they don't understand what they're hiring tech-wise.
Yeah,
it's so true. Why not just play to your strengths, okay? And clearly, you knew your space and you knew marketing. And so, just leverage the things you're good at. I think that's so insightful and so smart for hopefully my listeners to pick up on. So going forward, I mean, do you think there's any important personal characteristics that you and your partner have had that have kind of helped you push through and get where you've got?
I mentioned it before, but we're both just very, very, very hardworking people, and we both have hustle and a long-term goal with this business. It's not about trying to make £1 million overnight. Like, we would love this business to be successful financially and live the life that we both want to, but we both understand each other's values, the business values, and what we're trying to do.
I think this working hard thing is another interesting area. So, you hear a lot from the likes of Gary Vee, work hard, work hard, work hard. The only way to make it is work hard. Of course, then you'll hear the other side, which is work smart and so on. I mean, what does work hard mean, do you think? How do you frame it?
I think with working hard, especially in a new business, there's a lot of sacrifices that come with that. I'm not saying that you should sacrifice your health by working, with 2 hours sleep a night. It's not about that. It's just understanding your priorities. So right now I am working more hours than my business partner because she is nurturing 2 children under 2, but she's still working hard, like probably more than she has the energy for. But it's just about understanding what periods of your life you need to sacrifice what. Right now we are launching a new area of the business, so we're working a lot harder because we're trying to balance a lot of different things. It's also having that work ethic, like you want to keep going, you're still driven by what you do.
I think this is really interesting, this area, and my interpretation is always like, if you have purpose, it kind of cheesy but doesn't feel like work. It's
exactly.
I've got a 3.5-year-old, and I absolutely love spending time with him. And today he's like, "Daddy, play with me and don't do the podcast." But I explained to him that I really enjoy it, and I've got a purpose to help other people with this, interviewing wonderful people like yourself. And I feel like he understood, but I guess what I'm trying to explain here is that it makes the painful things of, like, for example, the sacrifice point you're making there a little easier because it's purposeful. And it's important, and actually, in a way, you make your business one of your children.
It is. My business partner does call Dose her first child, and she says 4 because she has a dog and 2 actual children.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great way of looking at it. I actually think it's a great way of looking at it, and you've got to love it, and that's why sometimes when people say, "I'm building this business up to sell it," I'm like, would you sell your 3.5-year-old? How much would you, And
that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think there's a slight misunderstanding there. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I've exited my business, so there's a time and a place. I think when they're teenagers, but each to their own. But I think it's one of those things. So what do you see kind of in the future for Dose? What's the dream? What's the long-term vision?
So we've spent 4 years at the moment, to date, to building this amazing community of readers. And now we're actually going to launch an e-commerce brand, which is something we've been working on for 2 years. So hopefully building something that our community wants, which we did a lot of research around, to sell to them and hopefully make more people feel better.
That's awesome. And we'll put the links to your newsletter and e-commerce site and all that. When it's launched, we'll update the links as well. Make sure it's all below. For anyone who's listening to this now, you can click through and see what's being talked about here, and you can click through to the social media channels for Dose. Just wondering, I have this thing personally about education. I think the education system is broken, to be honest, but doesn't mean you have to agree with me. I'm just interested in your view. I mean, what was your education like? Do you think it's helped you do what you're doing today, or do you feel like there is a problem like I'm suggesting?
I have this argument with my husband all the time. I think education's broken as well. I had a really normal education in my eyes. I went to a state school, and then I went to a convent high school, which was fine. I have no feelings of good or bad towards it. It's just where I went to school. And I had absolutely no idea at the age of 18 what I wanted to do. I had parents that didn't pressure me at all. They were like, as long as you are happy, maybe go to university. If you think that you have no idea, we'll give you a few more options. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to go to university. So I did. But the only reason why I chose my degree was because I got to go and live in New York for a year. So I did a degree in the most niche thing you could imagine. And it was a degree titled Fashion Merchandising Management. 3 years into that degree, I absolutely hated it and became a fitness instructor. I mean, I was probably letting people know a lot about my personality right now. I'm not very good at sitting still. So I had I don't know, I'd call it a normal education, but also a little bit weird. I don't believe that directly my education affected what I'm doing now. Certainly the area of fashion retail management did not. But at the same time, my husband believes, and I think he's probably right, I'm just someone who loves people, and I'm very good at leveraging relationships, and it is very much what I do now. And he said, you would have done that regardless. And he's probably right.
So that's interesting, isn't it? I think the natural core skills, people, you're very strong, because I think sometimes people's natural skills get squashed by education, in my view. It's sort of like fit into the system, memorize, take a test, and get the boxes ticked, and that can squash people's true nature. But you fought back. I feel like you've ended up leveraging what you're naturally good at, and not let your education hinder you. Because I can't see you as a fashion merchandising. I can't see you as a fashion merchandising manager in a big corporation. It's just not you, is it? But still, like you said, you got the travel in, which I think is also really important, especially for young people, to experience the world and see how it works. And did you spend a lot of time in New York?
I spent a year in New York, and I spent 3 years in Sydney. So I feel like I had some amazing traveling experiences. So
when's Dose going international then?
Oh my! I mean, we do have an international audience in our online readership. So I think we're working off a few ways around Brexit at the moment to try and get our products launched, and then we'll think about international.
Fair enough. Well, look, I want to thank you for giving up time today to come and share your story with us, your insights, knowledge. I appreciate, there's 15 years worth of experience you're kind of giving us in this podcast, and I'm really grateful. I just want to end, I guess, by just asking you, if you went back to kind of the younger you and gave some advice, what would that advice be?
Two things I'd say, and it sounds so cliche, and I really don't want it to, is enjoy the journey. You just don't know where you're going to end up, and life is a ride. So enjoy the journey. There literally is not a destination, and don't be in a rush, because I am always in a rush to do everything. I'm in a rush to get to places. I'm in a rush to hit a goal. I'm in a rush to travel somewhere. So I'd say probably stop being in a rush, which I have to be honest, the last year has taught me.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, your younger self, I'm sure, is listening and saying, you know what, I've really enjoyed the ride, so I'm fine with it. But I appreciate what you've shared here today. I've made notes myself personally, reminding me of things that I kind of knew in the back of my mind, but you mentioning them today remind me also myself. And I built 18 companies, reminded myself to enjoy the journey a bit more. So no, I really appreciate you, and thank you so much for taking the time out to share your story with us today. And we'll look forward to having you back on when the e-commerce site's flying. Come and tell us what's going on and your plans for the future. And thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Simon, for taking the time to chat.
Thank you for listening to the Purposeful Project Podcast today. If you got any value from this podcast, then do feel free to give us a review and give us your feedback. And if you think anybody out there might enjoy this story of this real life successful entrepreneur, then feel free to share. And of course, go and visit purposefulproject.com and join our mailing list at any point. Thanks again for listening.